Hello, everybody. Welcome in. Hi, I am Beth from Booksnest, and I'm joined. I'm going to try and point the right way. No, damn it, I thought it would be mirrored.
I never know. I just tend to sort of do this when I'm
Yeah,
talking to
sometimes
people
it
on
mirrors you,
screen.
sometimes it doesn't. I'm joined by
Yeah.
Amy McCaw.
Hi. Thank you
Yay!
so much for having me again. We were just talking before we came on about the last time we did this, I think was years ago. We're talking
hmm
about a new book now, new
We
series.
are. We have Amy here celebrating the launch of They Own the Night, which I will let Amy tell you all about, but it's very, very good. I think you guys will enjoy it a lot. Amy, do you want to tell us a little bit about this book?
I will. So it's an 80s Dracula retelling. It's got true crime vibes. It's got mixed media inside. And basically, it's about two siblings who are on the front cover whose father is a serial killer. And they are very, very close after the trauma that they've been through. Mia is a true crime radio show host. Johnny goes to interview a mysterious rock star called Vlad who has disappeared from society. Nobody knows where he's been for a few years. And Johnny soon realizes that there's a reason for that he has strange nocturnal habits and that he's now stuck in a castle that he can't leave. Meanwhile, Mia has decided that she's going to go a bit rogue and investigate some real murders for her true crime radio show. So they're just fully dysfunctional family, lots of chaos and drama. I think that's about
As you
it.
do, as you do.
I always write dysfunctional families. I've got a really calm kind of chaos-free family. My parents sometimes like, why are all the parents in your books horrible? Wait, well, they're not
Wait,
based on
say
you,
something.
definitely. Hi, Kirsty. Thank you. Hello, Melina.
Hello. So tonight we're just going to be chatting through some questions. If you guys have any questions, please do throw them at us. We'll have a section of questions at the end, but feel free to throw any about as we go. But whatever you guys would like, we're going to be chatting all things the book, writing process, vampires. It's a fun topic to talk about. I feel like
Yeah.
vampires. Everybody has watched some version of a vampire film or read some kind of vampire book. It's kind of timeless, really, isn't it? Since its inception.
Yeah. I've chatted to a lot of authors of vampire books about this, like why do we keep writing about them? Why are we so obsessed? And I think that is one of the reasons, just that they're so varied. Like I read Isadora Moon to my young child, and it's
Mhm.
very much they drink red juice and everything's very kind of sweet and sanitized. And you can go from that to the absolutely horrifying horror where the vampires are essentially, serial killers or ruthless zombies or any version. And I love that.
Yeah,
If I hear vampire in anything, I'm like, yes. I don't care if it's going to be terrible. I don't care if I'm not going to enjoy it. I'm going to try it anyway. Sometimes I
yeah,
read the blurb and I'm like, maybe, but then I see vampires and I think, yes, okay.
yeah. It hooks you in.
Yep.
Something to sink your teeth into. That was awful. I'm sorry.
Do you know what? You took the words right out.
That was so bad. Okay, so
It's got to be done. You've got to have vampire puns in a
you've
vampire
got to do it.
chat.
You've
It's
got. There's
only
so
right.
many.
It's when you do them by
Okay,
mistake, that's the best as well. Okay,
exactly.
let's get into it.
First question for you. I had to ask you this. I suddenly thought of this before we went live. Right, you have got a Mina and a Mia. Please
Yes.
tell me how many times you got the two mixed up. Like, why would you do
So
that to yourself?
many.
Like,
I literally, so at every stage of drafting They Own the Night, I did a Mina search just because I kept putting it in. And I kind of wanted to change her name and make it different, but it just was Mia. And she's
yeah,
just got such a Mia-ness about her that I couldn't change it. So I'm really conscious that every event I do, I'm going to have to think about my Mina and my Mia. But it's because I really wanted her to be obviously the Mina character, and I wanted that to be evident to readers. And as I said, she just when I was developing the character, she was so clear from the very beginning.
mm,
So I couldn't change the name. It'd be like me saying, "Hey, you're not called Beth anymore," just because I
yeah,
don't I don't want to call you that. I want to call you something
yeah.
else. It would be rude. So um yeah, it's
So
it's
yeah.
not ideal. And one of my closest friends is called Mia too. And she was
Oh
like, "Did
no.
you name her after me?" And I was like, I want to say yes, but okay, we'll go with that. Yeah, I named it after my friend Mia. That's why I put myself through all of this chaos.
Which naming process came first? Because you had the concept for this. Was it right before Mina and the Undead? Or
Oh,
was it after?
so long. When I first heard about retellings as a thing, they were all Beauty and the Beast ones at that point, and then there was the odd Snow White and Rapunzel, and I was like, I'd love a Dracula retelling. And at the time, I'm sure there were some, but I wasn't aware of them. And I was like, I need to do this. I need to write a Dracula retelling. It's my favorite classic. And I sat down and I was like, I've got nothing. This book is written in epistolary form. it's very complex. There's all these viewpoints. And I think as a new author, it was just, I didn't know where to start. I had no idea who the characters would be. I thought it'd be an adult book initially as well. And I told my agent it was an adult book. And then I emailed like a month later and I was like, Kate, it's a YA book. Sorry. Changed my mind. So yeah, I don't think I was ready to write it until after the Mina books. And then when I think I was writing the third Mina book, all of a sudden I had the idea that Mia and Johnny weren't going to be a couple, they were going to be siblings. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. I wonder why that is. And I was like, well, because Johnny's going to fall for Dracula. And I was like, of course he is. That's why I always wanted to happen. When I was reading the book as a kind of tween, I was convinced that Dracula and Jonathan Harker really liked each other. And of course, it didn't happen in that book. And I was like, maybe it's Sign of the Times. I felt it in the film too. I was like, Keanu Reeves and Gary Oldman, come on, there's some tension here. And nothing happened. So I was like, I'm going to make it happen. So that was, I think as soon as a story starts escalating and taking on a life of its own, I know I'm probably ready to write it, because it just keeps going. I've got a new book. I tried writing earlier this year and I was like, oh, I've got the beginning and I've got absolutely nothing. And it just started kind of writing itself today. And I had a little thought in the character's voice and I was like, oh, and it makes me sound a little bit, I don't know what, but I'm thinking, but sometimes phrases do pop into my head. And she just thought this really sarcastic thing. And I was like, oh yeah, that does sound like she'd say it. So I wrote it down. And that's how I know that this book might be ready to write, because it's been steeping in my head long enough, like a really good cup of tea. That's what I need to do.
I like that. Yeah. And you can tell, like, because this is one that's, I mean, both of them have had so much research put into them because of the eras that you're writing about. Like, I think as soon as you put anything historical, which is really depressing to call 90s and 80s historical, but you
Honestly,
instantly, like, even if you've lived it, you still have to like pour so much into the research of like just removing any references of pop culture that wouldn't have existed or things that have then influenced, like, Back to the Future, when like little tweaks then change the whole thing. It's like, what tiny thing influenced everyone calling a certain thing and stuff. Like, that must take so long to get your head around. And
it does. And to know what's important to people at the time too, because I asked my friend Josh to read it because he is a journalist. No, that's not a word. A journalist. I'm trying to combine the two words that I'm going to say in my head. He's a journalist and he's gay. And I was like, okay, can you just check this book? Because you would be the perfect sensitivity reader, authenticity reader, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And he was like, have you thought much? I don't think it is the place for it to talk too much about it in a YA book written by a woman. But have you thought about what it was like to be gay in the 80s and Margaret Thatcher and stuff? And I was like, yeah, I have a little bit, but not enough, I don't think. And talking to him, we sat and did a Zoom about it. And I was like, there's a big responsibility here, actually, because this was a really dark and difficult time period for a huge number of people, a group of which I'm not part of. So Josh really helped me, and lots of research helped me, and reading interviews with rock stars at the time that the book was set. I kind of tried to find like interviews that people have put online of people like Elton John and Freddie Mercury, because they got asked questions about stuff like that all the time, like about their sexuality and about how they identified in terms of gender, and you can see them being really careful because of the time period that it was. And, without going too much into the legalities of it, it wasn't allowed. You weren't allowed to talk about sexuality in schools. There was a law that actually prohibited it. So it was a really dark time. And I think that as soon as I dive into a time period, I realize how sensitive it is. The same as the 90s in New Orleans. I chose 1995 because it was a really dangerous time of their history. 1994, over 400 people murdered. And as an author, that's a really interesting fact, but those are also real people that got murdered. So I think I always have these ideas. I'm like, oh yeah, set a Dracula book in the 80s, that'll be fun. And then it's like, oh, actually, there's lots of really kind of deep things underpinning this I need to be really careful and sensitive towards. And the same as the Mina books, it's a real place, same as Edinburgh, it's a real setting. Some of the settings in both books aren't real, but I'm just really conscious of, like you said, it's history, but it's still relatively recent. There's still people who remember what it was like to be gay in the 80s. There's still people who lived in New Orleans in the 90s, obviously.
It's lived history. It kind of adds a whole different level. And that's interesting, like, talking about the kind of cultural significance of it within like the LGBT community and stuff as well. Like,
absolutely.
That's and everything that was going on with AIDS and things as well at that time as well. Like, especially talking about like vampire blood situations, like that's also like there's so much you could unpick. I know, like obviously you kind of have to restrict what you talk about because otherwise the book would be like 7,000 pages long. But
It
like,
was, and it's difficult because it's a YA book, so you want to be as honest as you can, but also not make it not audience appropriate. Because at the end of the
yeah,
day, it's meant to be an age 12 to 13 plus book.
yeah,
So I've kind of got to talk about it in a way that's digestible to 12-year-olds, but it's
yeah,
also real and honest.
yeah. Do you think
And
if
for
it
me,
was an adult book, how would you
yeah.
have kind of gone into that side of it a bit more then?
I honestly don't know whether I could have written it if it was an adult book because I'm not in the situation that Johnny is. I'm
But
not
yeah.
a gay man in the 80s. And I think that it weighed really heavily on me. And I talked to loads of friends about it. And I was like, can I write this book? Am I the
Mhm.
person to write this book? And I sort of had lots of conversations with lots of friends from the LGBT community. And the question was, like, what is going to be included? Is this going to be a coming out story? Is this going to be a kind of processing what it's like to be gay in the 80s? And
Mhm.
that's obviously going to be part of it, but it isn't the main focus because I think I'm always really conscious as an author. I don't want to tell a story that isn't mine to tell.
Yeah.
But I'm also going to have to write outside of my experience because I can't be every character. There's
Yeah.
not many 40-year-old women in my YA book, surprisingly.
Mhm.
So I'm always going to write outside my experience, but I don't want to write about somebody else's experience and kind of take the ability to do that away. I think I'm the right person to write a Dracula retelling. I'm not the right person to write a coming of age story about being gay in the 80s.
Mhm.
So it's a subtle distinction, but I think it's there.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think you've kind of got the balance very delicately done.
I
What
thought about it a lot.
yeah. What kind of started your interest originally in vampires? Because obviously this is like a big theme in your fiction. Like, where did it very first sprout from?
The first time I can remember reading about vampires, so all the nice things, like I was talking about that I read to my son, didn't really exist then. I'm sure that there were things like Mona the Vampire and the Little Vampire and stuff, but I wasn't really aware of them. So I jumped straight in with Dracula and Interview with the Vampire. I think I was probably about 10. I remember reading them by the pool on holiday and just
Mhm.
I can picture this copy of Interview with the Vampire, and it's from a charity shop. It was really old and falling apart. And I was just absolutely transfixed. I'm sure I understood very little of what I was reading, but just this idea of people that could travel the world and that could live through so much history just
Yeah.
fascinated me. And then I read Dracula, and again, probably didn't understand all of it. And then the Vampire Diaries was a big thing in the early 90s, the books. And then the Buffy series obviously came out in the
Mhm.
mid 90s, and that was just it. I'd already got this kind of foundational interest in, and then you can see the Buffy collection behind me, it's
Yeah.
evident. It made I think the things that you watch when you're a teenager, if you're the kind of person like me that's really into media and books
Mhm.
and learning, they imprint on you if you find
Oh,
the right
yeah.
ones. And Buffy
Yeah.
was the one for me. I was 13 and I just wanted to be her. I learned so
Mhm.
much about life and relationships and friendships from watching that program. And that's even before you get to the vampires. But yeah, I think that there's just so much stuff that I've loved over the years, like True Blood, as I've mentioned to you, The Vampire, The Lost Boys I've not mentioned, but that's absolutely
Mhm.
huge. I've got the Lost Boys bottle somewhere behind me. Um, they're all really big influences and all things that even if I'd not written books about them, I would have been watching them anyway, just because I love them. They're so
Yeah.
good.
The little vampire TV series. I
Yeah,
first read this as Mona the Vampire. Like that was a
yeah.
fun show.
Yeah, I think some of them, like, you've got to be the right age, haven't you? Like, people always talk to me
Mm.
about Goosebumps. I'm like, I didn't read Goosebumps till I was an adult because I was already, by the time they were kind of in around me, I was like, oh, I'm too old for those. I'm too cool.
Yeah.
I was never cool, so I don't know what I was thinking. But so I think that if you didn't discover those as a child, you kind of probably do what I did and just skipped to the adult, slightly
Yeah.
inappropriate stuff
I'm trying
straight
to
away.
think where I came into it because I remember watching Interview with the Vampire at quite a young age and quite finding that quite an interesting
Mm.
film concept. I've not read the book. I own the book. You've made me want to read it.
Do you know what? The series is quite, for me, quite hard to digest. Some of the books are. I haven't read them all, but there's
Oh, is
quite a
it a
lot about
series?
yeah. So it's the Vampire
Oh.
Chronicles. It's Into the Vampire Lestat, Queen of the Damned. You know the Aaliyah
Oh,
and
yeah,
Stuart
yeah, yeah.
Townsend film. That is one of the books.
Ah, okay.
And
That's good
so
to know.
I think Into the Vampire is the most accessible of the books
Yeah.
to me, and it's the one that I've read loads of times. I've read the Vampire Lestat a couple of times, and I really like that. Yeah, I think what Interview with the Vampire does that's interesting is it deals with a lot of the kind of vampire underpinnings that authors are still really interested in. Like
Mm.
it deals with, I mean, obviously there's the will they won't they relationship, like Louis and Lestat. I think that there's a lot of LGBT themes in vampire stuff interesting, like in Carmilla, and like in, you know, my version of Dracula. And I think that there's a lot of stuff about like safety and blood and stuff like that is kind of alluded to in Interview with Vampire
Yeah.
too. So yeah, I think it is kind of it's not a good introduction probably at the age I read it, but it's a good way into vampires. It's a
Yeah.
bit slow burning and slow paced, but it's done. I mean, Anne Rice is the master of it.
Yeah. What about like more modern stuff like Vampire Diaries, like Twilight and things like where they take it? Because Twilight is a very different type of definition of a vampire than
It
the
is, but do you
traditional
know
one.
what? I was absolutely obsessed. I'm trying to remember what year it was. So I got engaged when I was 21, and I think when I was 22 or 3, we went to America to check out where I was going to get married in Florida. And I remember going into Florida Mall and seeing this glossy cover, and it wasn't out in the UK. I'd never heard of it. And there's a red apple on the front, and it said that whole thing of you know, three things I'm sure of. Edward's a
Yeah.
you know, I'm irrevocably in love with him. He's a vampire. He wants my blood, or whatever the order of that is. And I just read those things. I was like, take my money. I want this book. And I took it to the theme park with me, and I was so antisocial. I read it in the queue. I read it at meals. I read it at night. I was just absolutely hooked. Went back
Mm.
to the mall the next day. I was like, I'm really sorry, guys. We're going to Disney in a bit, but I need the next 2 books in the Twilight series. And I bought those in hardcover because
Mm.
they weren't even out in paperback yet. So I got the first one in paperback and then 2 hardcovers, and I binged them in about 4 days, all 3 books.
Mm.
And again, I think they hit me at a point where I was in my early 20s. I didn't kind of perceive a lot of the stuff that now I reread Twilight a couple of years ago, and I was like, oh, I don't remember that. I didn't remember feeling like this when I read it and finding it, some of it, a little bit creepy and really
Oh, interesting.
problematic.
I've never reread it.
Yeah. Were you
That's
Team Edward or Jacob?
okay. So I neither of them
Serious question.
really. I never
Yeah.
went to either of them, but I then got a boyfriend whose name was Jacob. So I
Oh,
then
okay.
defaulted to Jacob because of the name.
That's such a teenage thing
Whereas
to do, Beth. I
I
applaud
think
you.
realistically, if I had to pick between them and we're removing Charlie, then it would be Edward, I think.
I
But
mean,
he's also manipulative as heck.
this is the natural transition of things, I think, when you watch Twilight now and you go, Charlie Swan is the correct love interest. Like
Charlie is the correct love.
for me watching, he's the person now that I look at and get, and actually Carlisle's not too bad either. I
Carlisle's
think
good
I've
too.
I've
Yeah.
reached that age.
Yeah. Or
Um,
Alice. I liked Alice as well. Like generally Jacob and Edward were not the ones for me. We have a team Jacob. Okay. Yeah, do let us
yeah.
know.
See, I was Team Edward in the books and in the film, and I
Mm.
still appreciate the kind of soulmates and being so absolutely in love with someone that it can send you a bit crazy in Edward's way. I think he,
Mm.
you know, some of his behavior was because in his defense, he loved her so much. Like he left her because he loved her and he thought that was the right thing to do.
Yeah.
Hard disagree, but as a teenager, you do that kind of stuff when you're in love. So I think I always responded to that, and I felt that Jacob was more of a friend in my
Yeah.
take. But now
Yeah.
I look at Taylor Lautner and I kind of think, maybe I would have been Team Jacob.
I you can't help but love Robert Pattinson's interviews about it. Like he just
Oh,
despises the fact that he did it all. I just love his interviews from it
I
all. I mean, I go
yeah,
Team Bella. I think Kristen Stewart is like one of the most beautiful women. So like, you know, she's cool.
she gets a bit of a bad rep, but I think
She
she played
does.
the part like how it was
She,
intended to be played.
everyone says she's so awkward. I'm like, no, she was playing an incredibly awkward character. Watch her in something
Have
like Spencer or
yeah,
something and see what she
yeah,
can do.
yeah. Have
Yeah.
you read the books? Because she does, you know, bite her lip and fall over everything. Like
Exactly. She
that's
did
the
a
character
really
that
good
she was given.
job, even if it was cringy. I did read Midnight Sun. I didn't love it, but it was interesting because you're getting Edward's perspective, but then everyone else's because he can mind read them, which is an interesting. Or actually, that cycles sort of around to another question: mind reading, vampire abilities. What is your favorite bit of vampire lore? Because obviously, like we've just mentioned Twilight, where I think the vampires are very different to like, you know, there's no inviting them in. Yes, there's the sunlight thing, but it's not like it's burning them. It's very different to a Anne Rice vampire, Bram Stoker vampire. What's your favorite bit of vampire lore, and how did you decide which ones to include in your book?
So I have a hill that I would be prepared to die on in terms of vampires, and it's that I think it should be difficult to be a vampire.
Hmm.
So, in the Vampire Diaries, I love the Vampire Diaries, absolutely obsessed with it still. But I hate it a little bit that they can put on a ring and they can go out in the sun because to me, vampires can live forever, stay eternally young and healthy. There's got to be a big cost for that. There's got to be a big downside. And
Yeah.
drinking blood and not being able to go out in the daylight to me are the things. So when it's like, oh, I can drink it from a blood bag, so I don't have to hurt humans and I can drink animals. Like I prefer it when it's like, no, actually, I have to bite a living human or I'll
Hmm.
die. Like
And it
that's my preferred take.
unhorrorizes it, doesn't it? Like
Yeah.
vampires are a staple of horror, but they've
Yes.
become more synonymous with like fantasy, which
Yeah.
isn't so scary sometimes.
Yeah, and I do think that there's got to be that moral quandary. That's what I enjoy. So
Mm,
my Dracula take was a little bit different. The Meaner and the Undead one, it was pretty similar. I didn't want them to go out in the sun. I want them to have to bite living humans because again, the blood bag thing doesn't really appeal. In
yeah.
terms of for me, I want it to be difficult to be a vampire because that's got to be the moral dilemma. Otherwise everybody in the book would want to be one. It's like Meaner would just be like, actually, can I
Yeah.
just join these ranks because it sounds really
A
fun?
good point. Yeah, because in Twilight, it's not like, oh no, I'd hate that. It's kind of like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm eternally beautiful and get a
Yeah, yeah,
cottage in
and
the woods.
a bit sparkly when it's
Oh
sunny. That's
no,
really hard.
my hair
Yeah,
gets natural highlights. What a shame.
I know. So that's the thing that I'm not really wedded to any part of vampire mythology, but I want it to be difficult. So in
Mm,
Dracula, in They Own the Night, I looked at the Dracula stuff and I was like, he can turn into mist. That is so random and like implausible. I'm going to use it because it's just
hmm.
ridiculous. And I wanted something a little bit outlandish and that kind of identified it as Dracula because Dracula can do that. He can just burst into a bunch of bats or a bunch of mist and everything's
Yeah.
fine. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to go for some of the ridiculous because I didn't really do that in the Mina books.
Hmm.
And then I stuck with my Mina thing of you've got to drink from a living human, you can't go out in the day, you don't age. I kind of don't deal with illness and stuff that much because you get into some kind of you can tie yourself in knots with that one. And I'm like,
Yeah.
there's certain things I stayed out of just because I think it would be a subject matter for a different book.
Yeah.
But when it came to it being set in Scotland and there being Scottish vampire myths, I was obsessed with Outlander when I started writing it. And it transpired that my husband's family, at the time, his granddad had had one of those things done, where you find out your family crest and
Oh
your
yeah,
family
yeah.
history. And his family had fought the Battle of Culloden. And I was
Oh,
like, sorry, what? Like with Jamie, like the obviously pretend character. So I was like, that is really cool. Your family, like you can see the roots of them all the way back to there and that just kind of merged with Dracula. And I was like, wow, Edinburgh is a really interesting Gothic city. Has it got
mm,
any vampire connections? And when I Googled Scottish vampire stories, I was like, oh, there's loads of amazing ones that I've never even heard of. Like the Goebbels vampire, which I'll let people read the book um, and find the full story. But imagine a bunch of kids in a graveyard think that there's a vampire there, so they arm themselves with loads of little tools that they found at home, and the teachers come and turn up and be like, don't try and kill vampires in the night, children. It's dangerous. And they were like, no, there's a vampire to kill. Like there's a vampire attacking children, so we're cool. We're going to stay. And I haven't really managed to find out whether this actually happened or not. But I found that really fun and
yeah.
interesting. And then it transpired that a vampire comic had come out the year before called The Vampire with the Iron Teeth. And I was like, oh yeah, maybe the kids were just playing at vampires, but what if they weren't? And that's what I really enjoy about vampire
Mm,
mythology. There's like this interplay of,
yeah.
yeah, it's probably a nice story. However, in New Orleans, a lot of people tell you it's not just a nice story. In other
Hmm.
cultures around the world, people do believe, they don't go out on certain nights or they don't go out at certain times because of these otherworldly creatures. And I love that. I love the blurring between fact and myth. I always play with those, I think, in my
Yeah.
books. I still haven't finished with it yet, I don't think.
Yeah, it's a fun way to play about with it as well. Did you
Mm.
find it easier or harder, kind of, because obviously this is i- uh, inspired by a story that's already written and already created. Did you find that easier to write an adaptation and slash inspiration story or harder because you had
It's
more stuff to
both.
stick to?
It's both because you've got a framework that you can use if you choose to, but the question is, do you want to use all that framework? And what I did was I chose to me what is the key arc of Dracula, took out characters that I wasn't that interested in, took out bits that I find boring. Like there's a whole bit of Dracula where they're trying to find the box of dirt and they just travel around the world a lot and find box of dirt. And I was like, not really feeling this. I'm just gonna have one coffin and that's fine.
Mhm.
And then my Dracula has got something like the box of dirt, something that makes him a little bit interesting and different, hopefully. But I decided to do my own thing with that. So I think that was the thing. It was choosing what I wanted to keep and what I didn't. And also, I felt a really big responsibility because it's my favorite classic, and I know it's lots of people's favorite classic.
Yeah.
I'm gonna tackle one of the most beloved books probably in all of literature, so I've got to make sure that I do this as faithfully as I can, but also do my own thing, because I'm sure there's people who read it and go, it's not close enough to the original, and there'll be people who read it and say it's too close to the original, do your own thing. So I
Mhm.
had to just carve my own path through that. You're never going to please every reader, but I tried to do both. I hope that people read it and go, oh, I see what you did there. That's Lucy Westenra. That person might be Van Helsing. There's a couple of contenders who could be Van Helsing,
Mhm.
really. And obviously, Dracula, Mina, and Jonathan Harker are a bit more obvious because of the naming of them.
Yeah.
And I think their roles are more obvious. But I thought it'd be fun for people to kind of go, oh, could that person, is Renfield in this? Could that person be Renfield? Is Lucy
Mhm.
Western? I haven't met a Lucy, so who's that going to be? And hopefully that's fun, because I liked that. I read Dawn Kurtagic's Dracula retelling The Madness
Mhm.
when I'd finished mine, but obviously it came out before mine did. And I just love the fact that even though we chose, when I found out Dawn was doing one, I messaged her like, oh man, come on, like, how have we done the same book? But of course hers is completely different. And
Yeah.
it's absolutely brilliant. But there are a couple of things where I don't think Dawn's read mine yet. She's got a copy of it. But I can't wait to hear what she thinks, because there are some things that we did the same thing, and there's
Oh,
some things
okay.
that we did different things.
Yeah.
And the same with Lucy Undying. There's a couple of bits, like there's one scene in particular that isn't in Dracula, and yet Kirsten White and I both did it. We like adapted a
Oh.
Dracula scene in a similar way, and I was like,
Oh,
how funny is
interesting.
that? That
Yeah, that is quite funny.
we've both gone with a really well-known Dracula scene and done our own spin on it, and it's the same spin. And there was only one moment where I felt like that in that book, because Lucy Undying is based on Lucy Westenra, so it's very much focused on her take and her story.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't focus as much on Lucy. It's more
Mhm.
about Mina and Jonathan Harker,
Yeah.
my versions of them.
Mhm.
Tyler.
Lovely. Anybody can pick up the book that we are currently talking about, Day in the Night. There is a link in the
Nice.
description down below, and that will also take you through to Blackwell's in general, where you can search for Amy's other books, which is Mina and the Undead, which is a fantastic series as well.
Thank you.
Also nostalgic vampire vibes. Um, in this book, you've got two narratives that we're following. We've got
Mhm.
Mia and we've got her brother Johnny, both dealing with very different things.
Yep.
Did you find yourself enjoying writing one more than the other, or leaning into one more than the other?
Mia is the complete opposite of me. She's very assertive, believes in herself a lot. She's very spiky and doesn't really care what anybody thinks about her. If anything, she doesn't. Oh, nice one, Kirsty. She doesn't fully understand how other people feel either. Whereas I'm very conscious of how other people feel. I think
Mhm.
sometimes to my own detriment, I'm conscious how other people feel. And sometimes she looks at people and she's like, I don't know what they're thinking, or why are they pulling that face at me? And that I found so fun, and I just leaned into it, and straight away her kind of slightly bitchy, sarcastic, almost rude style just kind of was there inside
Yeah.
my nice exterior. There was this kind of mean, I think, still redeemable and kind underneath it all, but very spiky character. Whereas Jonathan, I felt a bit more pressure because I'm not male, I'm not gay. I think I felt more pressure there that it's
Mhm.
different from me, so I want to get this right. And also he's really quiet and he's quite nervous and anxious. And I have some of those qualities. But because he's quiet, he was quieter to write as well. So I had to really make sure that Mia was just like, listen to me, I've got something to say. And he was like, excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you, but this is my story as well. So I had to wrestle with that a bit, because Mia did dominate me and the
Yeah.
story a little bit to begin with. And my friend Mia, funnily enough, helped me to dig a bit deep with Johnny and just say, like, well, he's obviously like you know, he's into books and movies and music. So we know this about him, but you don't show it on the
Mhm.
page that much. And I was like, oh yeah, he'd be listening to music all the time, wouldn't he? And he'd be reading and he'd be writing. And he's a journalist, so he'd be jotting things down in a little
Mhm.
notebook. And so I just teased out his interests and his other characteristics, so that his quietness didn't become a downside, because I think quieter
Mhm.
characters sometimes can be quiet on the page as well. Like if he's
Yeah.
in a room with Mia in real life, she would dominate the conversation. So I had to make sure that he still felt like a
Mhm.
really fully developed character, even though he was
Yeah.
quite.
I also love that you're saying quieter and not, like, labeling him as shy or anything, because I think shy has
Yeah,
become, like, a really negative connotation of, you're introverted and you're quieter, therefore you're automatically shy, but he doesn't ever come across like that. Like, he's clearly really talented at what he does and has a real passion and an interest for it, and, like, it just captures him in a really careful way in that sense, contrasting Mia's sass as well,
yeah.
which
And
is
the thing
fun.
is, they've been through something really traumatic. They found
Yeah.
out in their mid-teens, which is kind of the hardest point of a lot of people's lives, their
Mhm.
mid-teens, right? We're all going through like relationships and skin and friendships and stuff, and they find out that their dad's a serial killer and everybody knows it, so they can't escape from that, and their mum ends up moving them away to get away from it. So they've gone through this massive trauma and they've dealt with it differently. And like
Mhm.
Mia's become more outrageous and more out there, and Johnny's retreated. So I think that
Yeah.
knowing how different people deal with trauma too was part of what fed into that.
Yeah.
So I wanted to do it really carefully. And like you said, shy is not a bad thing. You know, I'm married to somebody, I'm sure you won't mind saying, who's really quiet. And
Mhm.
it's fine to be really quiet and to listen
Yeah,
during conversations
exactly.
and not be the person who talks all the time. And I think
Mhm.
that sometimes in books there is a tendency for everybody to be sassy and everybody to be
Mhm.
lively and confident. And real people, I don't know about you, but I'm not like that. I'm not constantly sassy and confident, and I may appear it when I do stuff like this, but I'm definitely not. So yeah, I think that it's fun to write characters who are a bit different, and it pushes me a bit more because it's harder to show that on a page. It's
Yeah,
harder
that's
to
a good
show
point.
being quiet but still listening,
Yeah,
compared with it's easy to write pithy, fun dialogue, I think, especially if you've
yeah,
watched Buffy 20
yeah,
times, it's just like
it's
that.
sarky and fu yeah, and I suppose you've also kind of you've advantaged yourself with Mia's storyline because you're getting Mia's present day looking back at the events that she's
Hmm.
then describing, so you've kind of got 2 different narratives of Mia, but you just have the one of Johnny, so we don't really have the reader doesn't know anything more about Johnny than what we're finding out at that time. So that must have made it quite interesting as well, having him be more of a challenge to write because you're not getting any other insight into him than the present day of his timeline.
Honestly, that was the hardest thing at the early stage. Me and my agent went back and forth loads on that, like how much of this is going to be mixed media. Because one argument is to write the whole thing mixed media, and I tried that with Mia initially, where it was just diaries and then just interviews
Mm,
with the police, and it left a little bit to be desired because although yes, she was writing in her diary and you were getting some insights, it was losing the kind of immediacy because she was always writing about stuff that happened. So I was like, well,
yeah.
I want a mixture of narrative and mixed media. So I tried that. And then Johnny had some other stuff in there too. And I was like, this isn't working. I wanted to strip Johnny's back and make it quite simple because actually now people are wondering why have I
Mhm.
done it? Why have I done it that way? And you can kind of
It's
find out through the course of the
interesting.
book what happens to him. It just changes things up a little bit, I
Yeah,
think.
I think so. It pushes the narrative in a different direction as well because, like, for me reading it, and I won't say anything more than this, but I was like, "Okay, what's happening with Johnny?" Because we're getting Mia's perspective retrospectively. Is that negative? Is that positive? I don't know. Like, it threw me there. With
I like throwing
regards to their
readers. This is
stories.
good.
Yeah, exactly. If you
Sorry.
were in this book, if you were in the events of They Own the Night, whose situation would you rather be in? Because 'Cause they're both in pretty crap situations. I feel like Mia's is I was gonna say hers is worse, but then Johnny's is really isolated, and that creeps me that, for me, was quite haunting, the way that his was so trapped.
Yeah, he can't get off the island unless the rock star who holds all the cards and all the power says so. And I
Mm,
did that really deliberately. It's very much an imbalanced relationship in terms of the power dynamics. And Johnny kind of spends the book trying to get, tilt the balance the other way, and figure out what's happening with this relationship. So yeah, I find that really terrifying to be beholden to another person, to
mm.
be I'm not going to say too much, but to be beholden to
I
them,
agree,
and
that
at their
is
whim,
unsettling.
Whereas Mia, I don't think she's finding some bad stuff like dead bodies, multiple times. So her life isn't ideal, but she's put herself in that situation, like she's
Yeah,
chosen to do it. So I
true.
think if I was her, I'd probably and I kind of relished in that, which I think she does. She didn't want people she knows to die, but she kind of handles it and she deals with it in a way. And actually it makes her radio show better. So she's in a way all for it
Mm,
because she's that person. So yeah, I think hers, if I was her, would be easier to live. I think Johnny's situation, yeah, he's with a hot rock star who really fancies him, but he also finds out that he's a vampire that he's trapped with. I mean, trapped with a vampire is in real life wouldn't be as fun as it kind of make things like Twilight would have you believe,
Yeah.
because you are their food source essentially.
Yeah, exactly. It's the isolation and the terror of that that's, I think, it's kind of leaning into the uncanny within horror, isn't it? That it's
Yeah,
just this really
like
deeply
could I
unsettling.
actually disappear? Nobody knows where I am because I've signed an NDA about interviewing a
Mm,
rock star. Nobody knows
yeah.
where I am or who I'm with, so I
The
could just disappear.
era really worked for you there, didn't it, with the 80s? Like, there,
Yeah.
you know, there's not the mobile connectivity, there's no Find My Friend, you know, there's
At some
nothing.
point, I'm going to have to write a book set in the current era, and I'm going to have to lose all the mobile phones. I talked to Goldie Moldovsky about this in The Last Girl. She was like, there's a particular scene where it would have been really helpful for the character to have a phone. And she's like, oh no, I dropped it in the snow. Oh, it's broken. And it's like, yeah, I didn't set out to do that. I think both time periods were very much about what I was trying to achieve. Like for Dracula, I was like, right, serial killers were all the thing in the 70s,
Mhm.
so her dad's going to have been like a 70s serial killer. So that was where the 80s thing started. And then the 90s, it was very much, this is a dangerous year in New Orleans history. So I'm going to put it there. And then I
Yeah,
realized Buffy came out a year later and I was like, oh man, I should have thought about that. But I stuck to my guns and I
yeah.
stayed with my most deadly year in history thing. Um, so yeah, it's tricky because you are very much constrained, like we've said, to the kind of
Mm.
norms and the culture of the time, but it does help the tech. Like
Yeah,
the internet doesn't even factor. So when
yeah.
weird stuff happening, Johnny's just like, oh, he I haven't really seen Vlad during the day. Like, oh, it's just because he's a rock star, right? And he just performs at night. That's not weird.
Yeah,
So it kind of helped me because if you had your mobile phone, you'd be like, Google my symptoms, pale,
yeah. Yes!
comes out only during the night.
Bella Swan style.
Yeah, am I dating a vampire?
Yeah.
So yeah, and I think that maybe could be interesting, couldn't it? Like
Mm.
dating a vampire in the modern era could be quite fun.
Yeah, yeah. It
But
was fun
not
the
for
way that
me
you
right now.
it was fun as well, like, the way that you kind of took a modern concept of, like, a podcast type of thing, a true crime podcast, and you turned it into a radio show instead,
Yeah,
and, like, that was fun. I liked that element of it a lot. I don't think I've read anything like that before where it's got the radio show
part of that was from
narrative.
um there's a Christian Slater film called Pump Up the Volume, which came
Mhm.
out similar time to Heather's, and he is a pirate radio DJ. He's in high school and he moves to a new area and is struggling to make friends. His parents buy him a long wave radio to talk to his friends because it's the 80s and they're not, they don't have mobile phones. And
Mm.
he sets up a radio show with this long wave radio instead. And that always stuck with me. And I was like, what an interesting thing for a character to do. Like,
Yeah.
set up an illicit radio station was just a thing that I assume you can still do that. It's maybe harder nowadays, but like given the right knowledge and the right equipment, you could totally do that in the 80s.
Yeah.
Because I wanted her to be a podcaster, but it's the 80s, so I had to think
Yeah.
of
It
an
worked well.
equivalent. Yeah,
Yeah, it
thank you. I
worked
really
really
enjoy
well.
I enjoyed writing in her voice for those scenes. That
Yeah.
was really fun to imagine
Yeah.
how she would say, like, hey everybody, like what is her intro gonna be and what is her
Yeah.
sign off gonna be and how is she gonna conduct herself? Because I think you and I probably know that when you're doing stuff on YouTube, you're a slightly different version of
Yeah.
yourself. And I wanted her to be, she's quite outrageous anyway, and I wanted her to be like this kind of, she calls herself Carmilla and she's
Mhm.
alludes to the fact that she may be a vampire and stuff, and then it backfires because she finds vampires
Yeah.
are real and she's like, oh yeah, I've just been messing about at this, but we're actually dealing with real stuff here.
Yeah.
I thought all that would be fun and it was fun to write. I'm glad it comes across as fun to
Yeah, it
read as well.
definitely does. It's fun, it's really fun. Hello. Yeah, same,
Thank you.
same.
So do I. I have always been obsessed with mixed media, and the Mina books do have a little bit of in like they have a diary in the first book and letters and stuff in other ones. And I was like, I'm gonna do this more. I really went for it in this one. And you know what? Ink Road
Mhm.
were great. I was like, I want these to be really designed up mixed media. Um, can we just try it and see how it looks on the
Yeah.
page? Because you're quite constrained as I mean, you're a designer, you know, Beth. You're
Yeah.
quite
Yeah, you've got that little
constrained
little
by, yeah.
in.
Yeah, so you're constrained by what you can do in a book.
Yeah.
It's got to look really clear on that type of paper and it's got to
Mhm.
be in a font. Because at first I was like, oh, fancy handwriting font. And I was like, nobody will be able to read it. So I kind of had to navigate some of
Yeah.
that. And they were amazing. Literally, Ink Road were awesome because
Yeah.
I just said, I've got this vision. Can we try and achieve it? And I'm going to try and explain to you. And same with the cover. I was like, I know what these three characters look like. I can't
Mhm.
draw, so I'm going to show you pictures of people that I think they
Mhm.
look like a
Oh,
composite
that's
of.
cool that you got to be
And they
involved
were
in that
really
though.
good.
Yeah.
They were really good at being patient with
Yeah.
me and letting me have my way, because it doesn't always happen in publishing. Sometimes you're just
Mm.
told, "Hey, this is your cover," and you're like,
Yeah, that is good. I'm
"Yeah,
so glad that you said about the swirly font thing because I read a book recently. I won't name the book, but if you've read it, you might know what I'm talking about. But the character writes with their left hand and they're right-handed, and they have to write these letters with their left hand. So
ugh."
clearly, the publishers were like, "This is a great idea if we make this look deliberately really bad." And I'm like, "I can't read it. Like,
Do you
I
know
know it's
what?
meant to be bad."
I'm really conscious. I remember a couple of readers now have said, they've messaged me and said, I'm dyslexic and I actually find the font of the Mina books really easy to read. And that was in my mind. I
Oh,
was like, that what I mean, obviously it's not a dyslexic friendly publisher necessarily, but I think UConn were aware of making the font as accessible as
yeah.
possible. And the They Own the Night font is similar in that I think it
Oh,
looks
yeah.
very clean on the page.
Yeah.
So I think for the mixed media, I was like, I want it to look different, but not so different that you can't
Yeah.
read it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it makes it
Because
more
I'm
accessible.
yeah, and I'm a teacher too, so I'm always thinking about like there's lots of people with different ways of learning out there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sabrina. No worries. This is all recorded, so we can pump up.
Yeah.
I'm sure talking pump up the volume. It is so
Yeah, I think
good.
so. Oh, I
Sorry,
hope it
Melina.
arrives
The
soon.
good thing is that although the publication date moved because of production issues, which happens, it's a business, isn't it? Stuff happens. Apparently the Waterstones copies are still going to be there by my original publication date, which is
Yay.
tomorrow or
That's good.
thereabouts. So like,
That's
because
good.
I'm going to London on Saturday to sign some books, and like I'm really hoping they're there, but I've heard that they will
There
be.
we go. If you guys want a signed one.
Do you know
So
what? I didn't need to do that much serial killer research because I was already quite okay with it. But I did look into I'd watched some Ted Bundy stuff recently, and I was quite
mhm,
interested in the fact that he managed to do what he'd been doing for so long because of crossing state lines. And the
mhm.
police at that time weren't very mobilized to deal with that. And also, DNA came in right around the time that my book is set. So I think the year before this book is set, or that very
Oh,
year,
okay.
there'd been the first case in the UK had admitted DNA evidence, and it was very primitive, and took a long time to get. So
Yeah.
I always, in these books, I've had to, both in the 80s and 90s, I've had to truncate timescales because I talked to a police detective who'd been a detective in the 90s for the Mina books. And he was like, yeah, what you're saying might take a week or two would take months. And I'm like, it can't take months because the book lasts a few weeks. So
Yeah.
I always put that in the acknowledgements, like I've changed some
Yeah.
stuff just because it's a story and it needs to. So yeah, I didn't do loads of research for this one about that, but I did kind of look into which killers were active in the 70s, when were they caught, which ones, because Mia does reference that in her podcast, so I wanted to check. The Yorkshire Ripper was one that was active. I don't really like the word active, I don't know how else to call it. Active at the time that my mum was at college, at Bingley College, which was an area where the Yorkshire Ripper was kind of,
Ooh,
so my granddad was apparently really scared of that. So I'd got that in
yeah.
my mind as well, like the parent perspective, because I'm a parent now. Um, how it would feel, your kids are at college in a place where bad stuff's happening to kids at
Mm.
college. So all of that was in my mind. I do, in terms of true crime serial killers, I'm really interested in cults. I think that the Nixium cult, I can't believe that it happened so recently to actresses and he's not a serial killer. But I've read a lot about that because I just can't fathom how really sensible people who are just living their lives can get sucked into things like that.
Mm.
But yeah, certainly Ted Bundy, Gacy there's Ed Gein, like the stories are so interesting. They're awful to read what these people did, but I think from a psychological point of view, I'm always just really interested in. I cannot fathom the idea of wanting to even hurt anybody else.
No.
If I accidentally hurt somebody, I'm really, really, really sorry
Mm.
about it. So I think the psychology. I went to see a talk about by a criminal profiler talking about this. And one of the anecdotes, so she was just talking about stuff that she'd learned over the years, and one of them was a guy had been doing a study about serial killers, and he made some criteria of like the type of the past that a person would have had and behaviors that they exhibit if they're a killer. And he ended up meeting his own criteria, and he was like, oh, like,
Oh,
so
no.
I could potentially. And he talked to his mum about it, and he was, I think he was genuinely concerned, like, she used the guy's
Mm.
name and he'd obviously given permission. And she said, yeah, but you won't become a killer, because some of these things have happened to you, and some of these you show some of these traits, but I raised you, and the very fact that you're questioning this and concerned about this shows that this won't be you. And I'm really interested in that, like, what extent is it something predisposed in a person, and what
Yeah.
extent is caused
That
by
is
experiences.
interesting, isn't it? Yeah, when you really dig into it, it's like, oh, there's so many questions we can have about that, isn't there? Like,
There is, yeah, good
and that's
question,
why it's
Kirsty.
interesting that it's such like it is a really dark topic, and as you said, this is a YA, this is aimed at a younger audience, but like, how cool would a book be that's like an adult one focusing on their dad and like everything that happened then, like a real dark horror kind of
I've
book?
always wondered, because in the Mina books as well, there are two adult characters, Armand and Cafferty, who kind of
Mm.
disappear for a while. And I allude to
Oh my
the
god,
sort of
look them
adventures
up.
that they've had. And I was like, oh, that'd be such a fun book, like a little buddy book of like this vampire that hates cops and this cop that kind of hates vampires. I was like, but I can't write an adult book based in my YA worlds, I don't think, because I think I'd have to do it, but know in my own head that it was inspired by that, but just call it a
Yeah,
different thing. Because otherwise I'm going to have
yeah.
these. Because I sometimes get 9-year-olds, like their mums will message me and stuff like, what's the content of this book? Because my 9-year-old
Mhm.
wants to read it. And I'm like, well, let
Yeah.
me tell you.
Yeah.
Look to this page and just check, and I read stuff like that when I was 9, and I turned out
Mm.
relatively okay.
I was reading darker stuff. Yeah.
Like the Stephen King collection there, I'd read quite a few of those by the time I was
Yeah.
10.
Yeah. Depends
Yeah,
on how you take it, isn't it? That is mad
it
to me, yeah, when
is.
you were saying about that, I was like, "What?"
Yeah. So I think part of the problem in the 70s was just that they didn't have the tech to catch a lot of these people. And it was things like, finding a weapon and stuff. And I'm not sure about fingerprints, because that's featured less in my books. I've looked more
Mm.
into DNA. DNA has been a thing in the Mina books and in the Dracula one. So I don't know about fingerprints. I think they're easier to test, aren't they? Because it's a physical
Yeah,
thing.
stamp,
I
yeah.
guess they won't have done the like electronic comparisons that they can do
Mm.
so quickly now. But yeah, it's the time that it
Yeah.
takes to do DNA investigations. They make it look instant on stuff like CSI, and I think
Yeah.
even now it's not instant.
Yeah.
But I was surprised when I found out that some stuff takes weeks and weeks. I was like, oh man, it's
Yeah.
not gonna work. I
Yeah,
need it
that's
to take
right. Speed
so
that up.
yeah.
For anyone interested in that kind of thing as well, Life on Mars is a really good example. If you ever watched it,
It's
it's
so good.
so
It's
good.
so
Like,
good.
the concept briefly is that a guy from the modern day gets thrown back into the 70s and he's a police detective. But it's really interesting because you get to see him expecting all the modern stuff. I mean, it's not modern anymore, but like it was. And he's in the 70s. So like this kind of thing, yeah, he wouldn't have had DNA stuff. So it is interesting when it
It
came
has one of my
about.
favourite scenes from a TV show ever, where he sort of raps Ice Ice Baby when he's being held in a hostage situation. He's like, "Come on, collaborate and listen." Ice 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 Baby and like diffuse the situation. I was like, this whoever wrote this is an absolute genius. I need to rewatch
So
it, even
I
as I'm saying
always
this.
think this. Yeah. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about mixed media, yeah. But yeah, was it quite fun creating it like this?
Yeah, I think the thing with the mixed media, because I've read, what I'm like, I've read lot of books like you have,
Mhm.
and mixed media, I think if it's done well, can be amazing. But you can
Yeah.
tell if it's crowbarred in, if somebody's just gone, I'm just going to put a newspaper article here, I'm just going to put this thing here, because it looks good on the page. I want
Mhm.
it to look good on the page, but also serve a purpose. So
Yeah.
it's really fun, because I wrote a list like what is available to me in the 80s, and like you said, stuff like podcasts. I was like, oh, that'd be awesome,
Mhm.
but no. So let's go radio show instead. And there's
Yeah.
things like newspaper articles, letters. It was really nice to be able to write in people's voice. So like I got to write a little bit as Vlad, because he writes a note in it, and
Mhm.
writing interviews with characters that we don't actually meet on the
Yeah.
page because of certain reasons why we don't meet them. But you get to read interviews with those characters. So it was a really good way of giving insights into stuff that I either wasn't able to show, just
Mhm.
because we're dealing with Johnny and Mia's first person point of view. So they can't show us everything. And the mixed media just allowed me to broaden that out a little bit. And also,
Yeah.
Mia, you find out on the first page, Mia's being interviewed by the police. So the police officer was able to say, hey, you just told me this. This piece of evidence contradicts your story. And she's like,
Yeah.
oh,
The diary entries and stuff constantly
yeah,
being thrown about there as well. Like, damn, what a
yeah.
thorough diary that girl keeps as well.
I
Like,
know, honestly.
her hand must have been like aching at the end of writing all of that. She's like giving a
Yeah, I know.
point by
I've
point
been there though.
detail.
As a teenager, at one
Yeah.
point, I did keep a very cringy diary that I found and destroyed in my later teens. I was like, I'm not
I
letting this survive.
Yeah, I
I
found an old one
can't.
recently and was like,
In a
I'll
way, I
whiz
kind of
through.
regret it, but oh, it
Yeah,
was so
I kept
cringe.
mine. I kept mine. I like, yeah, I'm sure mine are now cringe that I write still journal today, but yeah. I'll whiz through a couple of questions. I'm conscious
Yep.
of the time and I want to be able to get to a few more. So we've spoken about you've delved into the 80s, you've delved into the 90s. Which one do you prefer writing about?
I was a teenager in the 90s by the end of it because I'm
Hmm.
ancient. So there's something about the 90s for me that because I actually remember it, it was really nice to be able to think, well, I remember people wearing that Friends, there was a Black Friends t-shirt that just had the lettering on with the little dots underneath. Like
Yeah.
I remember that. So and putting like t-shirts with people just wore like t-shirt with a smiley face on before emojis were much of a thing.
Hmm.
Um and like internet cafes. It was really
Yeah.
nostalgic for me because I actually remembered it. The 80s, I was born in the 80s. There's a song about that, isn't there? But it was more removed to me because I was really young in the 80s.
Hmm.
I remember little bits of it, but I don't remember 80s culture. I
Yeah.
remember strawberry shortcake and Kylie. That's about it as far as culture goes. So yeah, I think there's something for me about writing what is ancient history according to many of these teenagers. They're like love telling me I wasn't born in the 90s when your book was set. I'm like, thanks. I feel really old now. And some of them were born, like I was talking to some recently, and they were like, oh, I was born in 2006. And I'm like, 2006? Like, that's last year, isn't it?
Oh,
Um,
yeah. I was at an event very recently and I suddenly realized that everyone I was around was born at least 2005 onwards. And I was like, you guys were born in the 2000s? And they went, yeah, aren't you? And I'm like, no.
this was me when I started as a blogger and like the days when we first met each other. Like, I remember thinking, oh, we're all similar age. And you lot were all like saying you're in your early 20s. And I was like, early 30s here. I'm just going to stay quiet.
It's
Um,
yeah, the older you get, like I play rounders and there's like such an age of range of ages and one of them's like 18 and she was like, "Oh, you're quite young to me recently." And I was like, "Yeah, I'm 30." And she was like, "Oh, I didn't realize you were so old." I was like,
It's
"Thanks."
the parents at school. Like I'm one of the older mums by being in my 40s. And yeah, we range from like 20s to 40s.
Yeah.
So it is quite interesting that we can have kids the same age that share those
Yeah.
experiences, but we are so in such vastly different parts of life. The
Yeah.
90s were 2 years ago, Shelley.
Definitely.
I'm
Just
sticking to
in the past. Okay. Let's talk about Vlad a little bit. He's a rock star with a
yes.
secret.
Mhm.
He must have been a lot of fun to write. Did you base
So
his
much fun.
kind of rock stariness off of any 80s names? Or like was he completely
I
original?
did. So I read interviews and watched music videos of Billy Idol,
Mhm.
Elton John, Freddie Mercury, David Bowie to some extent.
Mhm.
And it was particularly an Elton John interview that I found that typified like the kinds of questions that I imagine Vlad being asked because he'll be like photographed, out on a date with Freddie Mercury, say, and then he'll be photographed out on a date with a woman. And like I
Mhm.
think newspaper reports, like I imagine them like trying to get information out of him. So I found some
Yeah.
articles from Elton John, and he dealt with those questions in the days of his career where he wasn't talking fully openly. He dealt with them with such dignity, like telling the truth, but also just in a way that kept him and the people around him safe. And I was like,
Mhm.
man, this is what I want this character to be like. Like, I'm going to
Yeah.
model him on Elton John to some extent. And then his style is more like, White Wedding and Billy Idol and that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Definitely
Um,
not Elton John in his style.
Not particularly, but
This is
also
the guy we're talking about here, guys.
I wanted to write a morally ambiguous vampire. I have one of those in the Mina books, but generally in the Mina books, my vampires are a bit like, oh, I want to be good. I don't want to bite people, but I have to. So I
Mhm.
wanted to write one who is like, I like biting people. Biting people's fun. I like being, a bit of a bad boy.
Mhm.
And you can read the book and find the extent to which
Yeah.
that goes. But I wanted to write that because I love when you ask me who are my favorite vampires, it's like, well, Spike from Buffy, Eric from True Blood, Damon
Mhm.
from, Vampire Diaries,
Yeah.
the Snap from Interview with the Vampire. It's the ones who are like, they're really appealing and charming, but also they could turn around and snap somebody you like's
Yeah.
neck for looking at them wrong.
Yeah.
And I think that's really the place where I'm really interested in vampires because those types of vampires aren't very much like humans. They're like human serial killers, but
Mhm.
they're not like a typical human that you would meet. They're
Yeah.
just very much their own thing. And that was really, really fun.
Which I think is really interesting because if you think about it, if you've been on this planet for a long time as a ever living vampire, you know, you might start off life being nice and friendly, and then like loneliness, time, seeing everyone you love die, everything probably ebbs away at you. V. Schwab does this really interestingly in Bury Our Bones,
Yeah, I
because
need to read that.
like very interesting depiction of three different vampires at
Mm.
different ages and stages in their lives. And like the concept there is that the longer you've been a vampire, the more likely you are to lose your mind in it. And I
Mm.
think that's a really interesting conversation of like older vampires, that actually I think the more realistic depiction is that they do lose their humanity in it, really. And like that's kind of what you see like in the morally ambiguous, because you know Vlad's an interesting character. I never knew whether to trust him or not, and I won't say whether you should or not, but like, you know, I kept being like, yeah, no, I like him, and I was like, no, 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 I don't, and I was like, no, no, I do again, no, no, he's fine. I'm like, no, 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 I don't. Like I just kept going back and forth, and just decided to
That's
stop
what I
trying to
like.
decide if I liked him or not.
I really like watching stuff like True Blood and thinking, okay, with
Mm,
Eric, how far can these creators push this vampire towards evil and we
yeah,
still like him? And that's what I really wanted to do. I want us to play with that. Like,
yeah,
at what point do readers lose sympathy with a vampire or do viewers lose sympathy with a vampire? And like with Spike in Buffy, there's a very specific place where I've lost sympathy with Spike because
yeah,
he went way, way beyond the sense and morality that I'm okay with.
hmm,
But a human man could go as far as he did in that direction, if you know what I
yeah,
mean. So it is interesting, like
it is,
comparing vampires to their human counterparts and like,
yeah.
are they morally grey in a human sense or are they morally grey in a vampire sense or
Yeah,
both?
losing humanity, and there's almost like a sense of entitlement about them. Like, I'm thinking like Laurent from Twilight comes to mind. Like he
Yes.
is chill and cool, and you're like, yeah, this is a good guy, and then you're like, it's not a good guy. Like, you know,
No.
he's got a really interesting sense of entitlement about him, almost, that he is better, and it should be respected because he's a vampire. And like, there's that kind of element with
Yeah.
Vlad as well, a little bit, I think, isn't there?
I think old vampires sometimes start to feel like gods, like they've lived beyond humans, so they think they're better than
Yeah,
humans. And also they live that long because they're smart. And
yeah,
in the world of my books, generally there are vampire slayers. So if they've survived in
mm-hmm,
that world, they've been careful, they've been secretive. Um, yeah, I mean, wouldn't they? I would actually like to write that, like a newly turned vampire, like having to cope. Rachel Harrison does this really well in her books.
mm-hmm.
There's So Thirsty, the vampire one, and then there's Such Sharp Teeth, the werewolf one. It's like, what would happen if a modern woman became a vampire or became a werewolf? Like, what
Yeah,
would be the complaints? And like the werewolf one is
yeah.
stuff like, would you need to shave your legs more often? Like, is that a thing?
I'd love to
Um,
see it like with how we have such tedious worries as human beings. Like,
yes,
you know, social media, which filter should I use on my photo? Like, is this
yes.
gonna get enough likes and stuff? Like a vampire that's been around for hundreds of years would be like, what? Like,
Yeah, and I do think that that for a newer vampire would be more present. And then as you start to realize that time for you is potentially infinite, maybe you become a bit blasé, more blasé about time and a
mhm,
bit more like I think
yeah,
Lestat, that kind of world weariness to him. He's like, I've seen everything and I've been everywhere and I've
mm.
done everything, you know. It transpired that Lestat's been a rock star too. I didn't realize this until after I'd already decided Vlad was a
Ah,
rock star, and then I read. I don't remember which book it is. It might be Vampire Lestat, and I was like, "Oh
mhm.
man, I thought I'd come up with a vampire being a rock star,
Oh,
and I
no. Oh,
didn't."
that's so cool. Well, he would
Um,
have loved TikTok because he wouldn't have seen all of that, would he?
well, this is it. Like, it's so interesting to think of a vampire in social media. Yeah, I
Mm.
could write a book about it. Definitely, I'll save that.
My on that final point, we humans have a finite amount of time on Earth, and we choose to spend so much of it staring at our phone. W Would an immortal spend more time staring at their phone because they have no cap? We have a cap,
Yeah,
we still sit there and doom scroll.
yeah.
Just a bit of
We do.
dark
I don't
philosophy in my head
know.
there.
I don't know. I feel like what we do in the shadows probably deals with that. I need to watch a bit more of
Yeah,
that
that's
because it's
true. Yeah, yeah. Okay, quick fired one for you now as well. Vampire or
okay.
werewolf, which would you rather be?
Vampire. How about
Yeah,
you?
vampire. Yeah, again, especially if I can be a Bella Swan vampire.
Yeah, I mean, beautiful, live forever, very little
Yeah,
consequence apart from a bit of
yeah.
sparkling. Yeah,
We'll take the
it
cottage in
sounds
the woods
yes.
and the
And the
library.
Edward Cullen, I mean, I wouldn't say no.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Okay. What is your favorite 80s horror film?
The
No
Lost
pressure.
Boys.
Lost
If
Boys.
you
Okay.
yeah, if you can count as horror, it's very mild as far as horror goes. I just love it. It's so
Yeah,
good.
fair.
It feels like it could have been made now, but as an 80s film, like historical film, it's so funny and dark
Mhm.
and interesting. And I think the vampires are interesting in that too. Like it's their own whole take on like the biker vampire, like they're a gang and they're
Yeah.
cool and like they induct people into their little gang lifestyle.
Yeah.
I think that's just all really fun.
Yeah. We're pretty much like up against the time we said we were finishing. I do have a couple of other questions for you. Do you want me to throw them at you, or like how do you want to?
If you don't mind, I'm quite
Yeah,
happy.
yeah. Okay, we'll we'll
As long
we'll
as you
go
want to.
through them. We'll try and speed through a couple more. Um, you've talked about so many other books, and I know that Dracula is going to be a big one. But when it comes to writing this kind of merge of fantasy horror that you've got, what do you think is your biggest inspirations? We'll say aside from Dracula and Interview with the Vampire. Like, are there any other ones?
I think places always give me the way into a book. So taking literary inspiration aside, New Orleans was 100%
Hmm.
the inspiration for the Mina books. Edinburgh really gave me my focus for the Dracula ones. So there's that. I go to a place and I'm in the catacombs or I'm in a castle and
Yeah.
instantly my brain's going stories, stories, stories. What could I write about this? But in terms of reading books, it's interesting. I asked an author friend who I won't mention because the book hasn't been announced, a well-known author, would you like to read my vampire book? And she was like, no, I'm writing my own. Please don't give me that. Whereas I read everything. Like I don't ever stop myself. So I'm writing a vampire book. I read all the vampire books. I
Yeah.
read whatever I want to read. I never kind of filter it because I'm really confident that I'm not gonna accidentally take. I know
Yeah.
myself enough now. I think I'm maybe a little bit will seep in, but nothing,
Hmm.
and I'm not going to intentionally copy anybody. So yeah, I think of my peers as being people like Kat Ellis, Dawn Kurtigich, Cynthia Murphy, Catherine Foxfield. I think all of their books are so tightly plotted and intense and have really good characters that kind of throw you right into it and make you care about them, and then they do bad
Yeah.
stuff to them. I think Josh Winning does horror so well. His adult horror books particularly. I'm like, I read every new one and I'm like,
Oh,
oh,
I'm
it's
gonna have
so
to make a
good. I
note
need
of
more of
Josh
these.
Winning. Okay.
Yeah, so you
Mad
need
Hub.
to read Heads Will Roll.
Okay.
It's a summer camp for adults who've been cancelled, and
Oh,
the main character has been cancelled on social media, so she runs with a tail between her legs to this camp, and people start getting the heads chopped off. And they've handed over all their tech, and they're in this remote location. It's so good.
oh my God. I
And
love a camp slasher. I love them.
yep, camp in all sense of the word,
Yeah.
And
Kaylee
then you've got,
Bayron's is a good one
yeah,
as
yeah.
well.
I
You
was
mustn't
just
die.
literally took the words out of my mouth. That was a
Yeah.
real kind of, as I was reading that, whenever I read a book like that that's really good, I'm enjoying it as a reader, but I'm also unpicking it as an author and thinking, how can I
Hmm.
learn from this? And Kendara Blake, I think that I enjoy her fantasy books, but her horror, Anna Dressed in Blood, and her take on the Buffy books, which is the kind of horror fantasy, divide like Buffy always
Hmm.
was. She just is so good at characterization and dialogue, and particularly Anna Dressed in Blood because it's her own characters. You fall in love with this boy Cass who's had a really
Yeah.
hard life, and then he meets this ghost Anna who he's supposed to kill, but he doesn't, and it just
Hmm.
it's they're awesome. I think we're really lucky to be a YA author in the current time. There's just so much good stuff to read, and then I've
Yeah.
started reading loads of adult horror too. Like I mentioned,
Hmm.
Rachel Harrison
Hmm.
and Josh's books are adult too.
Yeah.
Um, I read it all. I'm not stopping myself from reading vampire books, just I'm writing them.
No.
Otherwise, I'd never read the stuff that I
Yeah.
want to read.
It's interesting as well to see, like, I'm playing about with an idea at the moment that's like an end of the world
Yeah.
idea that I'm writing. And anything that gives the concept of knowing your death is coming is really interesting me because I am loving seeing every time I meet anyone new, I'm like, what would you do if you knew you had a week left to live? And everyone's like, what are you doing? Beth, shut up. And I'm like, no, tell
Have
me.
you read Have you read The Quiet at the End of the World by Lauren James?
Oh, no, but I have heard of that. I'm going to add that to my wish
It's
list.
really good. Dystopia always makes me twitch a little bit because it feels very close to
I
real life.
agree. Yeah, it both
Uh,
fascinates me and terrifies the shit out of
Yeah,
me.
honestly. Whereas that, it's about the quiet at the end of the world. It's about the nice little life that you can make yourself at the end of
Ooh,
humanity. It's really interesting
interesting.
because
Ooh, okay.
to me, it was a different take on the end of humanity
Okay,
and the
adding
world.
that, you're just giving my wish list more books at this point, Amy.
But honestly, I wouldn't. I like with Dracula retellings. As soon as I knew I was doing one, first I checked there weren't too many. I was like, has there been a
Mhm.
recent YA one where I'm going to be annoying people just adding another YA Dracula to the pile? And actually, there
Mhm.
haven't been loads of them, and there certainly hasn't been like a massive YA one.
Yeah.
Lucy Undying and Dawn's books are probably the two big, like recent ones. The Madness that I was talking about earlier. So I kind of checked that, but then I was trying to get hold of vampire retellings to read them and see like what did they do? I'm going to do my own thing, but I want to steer away from their thing, and
Yeah.
I want to kind of get my creative juices flowing by reading.
Yeah.
Like, I watched, when I started writing this, I watched all the good vampire stuff like The Lost Boys and the Buffy movie, and I'm not afraid of other, like, immersing myself in the pop culture of it. You have to be
Mhm.
mindful of it. Like, sometimes I will start writing
Yeah.
something and I'm like, this is really good, and I'm like, that's an episode of Buffy. Or I write a line and I'm like, this sounds familiar, and I'm like, that's from Friends. So yeah, I think it's gonna happen. I think
Yeah.
authors, we are magpies. Our books are the culmination of our own experiences and imaginations,
Mhm.
and what we've read and watched is part of that. So there is going to
Yeah,
be stuff,
absolutely.
and I do it consciously quite a lot. Like, I deliberately reference things, but I'm sure I've not like a Dracula specialist lecturer put my Mina book on the syllabus, and she saw it as a Dracula retelling, and I was like, that's interesting, because I did not intend it like that, but she picked so many things out that made it a companion to Dracula, and I was like, I didn't intend those, but there they are.
Yeah.
um so I loved how she, as a specialist in Dracula, read that
So
book
that
as
yeah.
being a real nod to Dracula. So yeah, it's very interesting. So yeah, I
Yeah.
absolutely, for you, I would read it all if you feel comfortable and it
Mm.
doesn't hamper your creativity.
Yeah.
Read it all, watch it all, and kind of figure out where you fit.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Okay, final couple of questions and then we shall round off because I'm very aware of
Okay.
time. Um, the kind of so obviously this is not your first novel. You've got a whole series out there. You've got other books. How did you find the publication journey, and like what is your writing process like this time round compared to debuting and other books that you've written? Like, was it easier? Did you feel like you had it under your belt by now? How did you find it?
So publication was interesting because I think that the feedback I was getting from editors was that they'd heard of me and they were aware of me. And sometimes that was like, yeah, we absolutely want something like this. Can we
Mhm.
read more? Or, we'll consider this thing. And sometimes it was like, yeah, we're aware of her. And actually, we don't need, like, there was one publisher that really, really liked it. And they mentioned dark academia and stuff, and they're like, we can't take it on because we've got a book coming out. And then this book just came out recently, and I was like, yeah, okay, I see why you couldn't take mine, because it's not
Ooh.
that similar, but it's similar enough that, if you're pitching a book, you'd be like, well, these are both dark academia books set in a different time period or whatever,
Yeah.
so whatever the things were. So that was interesting, that I felt a bit more like I had a footing in the publishing industry. And then
Mhm.
I was really aware of Ink Road, and I'd actually asked my agent to submit to them. So when they offered, I was like, yes, a publisher like that I really am already really excited by.
Mhm.
Because UCLan, when I signed with them, they were really new, and they were kind of, I think they'd only published one or two YA books when I signed with them, so they were a bit more untested. And
Mhm.
ultimately, they've got a really good YA back catalogue now, but
Yeah.
it was kind of a risk early on. I didn't know what I was getting into. Um, the writing process, I want to say, was easier, but it absolutely was not, because this book is more ambitious than the Mina books. I think
Mhm.
making the Mia and Johnny timelines match up in a really
Yeah.
seamless way, because he's gone off to Scotland, she's back in the north of she's at the south of Scotland, he's gone off to the north of Scotland.
Mhm.
At the same time, they're doing completely different things, and then they
Yeah.
come back together, and I had to marry those things up, so that was really hard.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that I pushed myself to write, because Mina in the Mina books is a girl from Yorkshire who goes to New Orleans and really likes it. And I was like, well, that's me, basically. So I had to push myself further with this one too, that there were characters that were further outside my experience. So I
Mhm.
did it to myself. It was a harder book, but I did that on purpose. I think I wanted to
Mhm.
push myself.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely paid off.
Thank you.
Final question for you. Are we getting a sequel? Are you able to say anything about that?
I left a little door open at the end of the book, you may have noticed.
Okay.
So the option is there. At first, I thought, I don't want to write one, but a few things have started ticking over in my head,
Mhm.
where there's quite a lot of characters where I did stuff to them in this book, and I want to see how that would unfold and how
Yeah.
they would um, continue to live their lives,
Mhm.
having what's happened to them, and what I did to one character in particular. I'd like to explore that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think for me the door is open, but for publishing it's always the case of, who knows?
Yeah.
Ink Road might want something different from me. I'm currently working on something that isn't a YA book, so it wouldn't be soon, I don't think. I want to
Mhm.
get this other thing out first. It hasn't got a book deal or anything, this new thing, it's just me. tinkering away at stuff. So yeah,
Exciting.
I want to write children's books, I want to write adult, and I want to write YA. So at some point it's going to happen, I think, where I'm going to have 1 or 2 books out a year, hopefully, but that's not always going to be a YA book necessarily.
It is interesting. I love hearing about the
Thank
writing
you.
process.
I'm just a big mess, Ellen, is the process. And I plot out to about halfway through the book, and then I don't know what's going to happen, so I have to write it. I literally can't. I can normally see the ending, and I can see to about the midpoint, and then I've got nothing. And I just have to work it out as I go. So don't do what I do if you can. But to be honest, though, I now trust the process, and I used to freak out a bit and be like, this is going to take me a long time, and I'm going to make mistakes, and I'm going to have to redo them. And it's like, but actually, I've got to a finished book at the end of this, once with an anthology, 3 times with a trilogy, and now with a potential standalone or duology, whatever it ends up being. So I'm trying to have a bit more confidence in my abilities, that I know it feels like a mess in the moment, but it does all come together seamlessly at the end, hopefully.
It does. Thank you so much to everyone who's kind of just chatted away to us as we've gone. Does anyone have any absolutely pressing last minute questions for us to ask just before we wrap up? And in the meantime, if anyone is posting any in, Amy, do you just want to kind of tell us about anything you've got coming out? Like you said, you were doing signing some books in London.
Yes, I am.
All of those.
Yeah, so my UK launch is at Doncaster Waterstones tomorrow on the 11th of September. So if you're watching this after that fact, sorry. I am going to do informal signings on Saturday the 13th in London. So quite a lot of books. I'm not sitting down and signing or anything, but quite a lot of books like Piccadilly and Foyles should have early copies of my books, assuming they've arrived. And then I'm doing MCM Comic Con in October. I'm doing 3 panels and possibly more stuff yet to be confirmed. And Yelk at again, which I feel really lucky and really happy that I keep getting to go back to these cons, because I just love them. Like you, Beth, I've been going to cons. Well, I've been going to cons probably nearly as long as you've been alive. Not quite. I've been going to cons for like 23 years now. Show my age. I do love them. So I love the fact that I get to go and be an author at them. So yeah, if you're at MCM Comic Con or Yelk, come and see me. I'll be there talking about I'm on some very varied panels at MCM this year. It's quite cool. They always give me different topics to talk about, and I quite often chair them, so I kind of get to lead the discussion. Like one of them is a YA one, I'm on a fantasy one, and then I'm on a queer representation in books one. So like a total spread of topics to talk about, which is cool. And if anybody is thinking, I've got a question, but I want to just ask Amy directly, please do. And thank you, Melina. And if you're watching this after the fact and think I've missed Liza's question, again, just reach out and ask me the question. You will. Amazing. I'll see you there. Oh, I'm doing the quiz at Yelp too. I forgot about that. I'm getting to do the Yelp. I get to write the quiz this year.
Oh, that's fun. That's fun.
Yeah, I get all
all so much for coming by. Thank you, Amy, for this really interesting chat. I think it's always really fun to pick apart a book that's based on another book as well, like because you've got so much more to talk about. Like we've already got this lore established, so this has been really fascinating chat to be having. Thank you for everybody that's come along and chatted. And as I said, there is a link down below to pick up this book. There it is. Look at it.
Thank you. I've got
we were discussing this earlier. This should be another selling point.
It's actually the floppiest book I've ever written, and I have no control over that. But thank you, Ingrid, because I remember we talked about this at my last launch. My second book smelled particularly nice. Apparently,
you've got to smell the book.
It does actually smell really nice, and the paper's nice. The paper matters to me too. That was the first thing I did. I got it out of the box. And I was like, reaction to the cover is lovely. What is the paper like? Oh yes, it's nice paper.
Not only should you buy it because it's a good story, but the paper quality is lovely.
Yeah, it is nice. It looks really nice on the page. I'm really proud of it. I think that everybody involved has done a fabulous job.
Absolutely.
Not just I wrote the book, but they made it look nice.
It's an incredibly fun book, but also just has so many different layers to it of things that are going on. So you guys should absolutely check it out. There is a link down below to Blackwell's where you can purchase a copy, but I'm sure you can get it in other places too if that you have preferred places of shopping. Thank you so much, Amy, for joining me for tonight. It has been great fun. We're gonna say goodbye now. Anything last minute you want to add? You've pretty much gone through everything you've got coming up.
No, I'm so happy. Thank you for having me again, Beth. It's been lovely. I always love chatting to you. And thanks for people in the comments. And hopefully I'll see some of you in real life at Comic Cons and stuff. Bye.
Absolutely. And if you've enjoyed this, send a link to your friends. They can watch it at any point as well. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
good. Oh, hang on. Thank you for the stream. You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.